Perfect, thank you. And before we start on the questions, just wondering if you could tell our listeners and readers a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Darius Namdar, and I've been in the hospitality business for about 6 years now. But I had formerly been in a very different world. So I'd started my kind of career in finance. So I did sort of fixed income sales and trading, and then realised that wasn't the world for me, and that being in restaurants and around people and was really what I loved. And so started in restaurants about 5-6 years ago now at the Wolseley, where I was started as an assistant maitre d' and then worked my way up to a lead maitre d', and then opened Chiltern Firehouse as their head maitre d', and then opened a hotel called the Beaumont Hotel as their head maitre d', and then came on board for this project in 2015 to do the refurbishment and then manage the team as the general manager. So then really in the last 2 years I got really into cigars, and mainly because, I don't know if this is going too far, but to answer your question, that's how I've got to where I am today. Cigars was a couple of years ago.
Good. I really like what you've done with the place as well. The refurbishment looks great. Well done.
Well, I have to give credit where it's due. Tino Zervadaki from MHZ in Paris, he's the brains behind it. I mean, some of the detailing, like the William Morris paper, that was Mark Birley's sort of design. He a lot of the foundation of the club is thanks to him, but Tino did an incredible job in the refurbishment.
So you won Habanosommelier at the festival this year. What did that mean to you?
It was amazing. It was quite an experience. I think what it meant to me is a lot of hard work had paid off. I mean, it had been, starting in the UK, you can do the master's course as the sort of, I think that's the sort of the hardest and most thorough course that Hunters and Francois do. So it's called the higher certificate. And once you've passed that, then you, last year, Hunters said that only the masters were invited to take part in the UK contest. And then once you win the UK contest, you get a place in the world contest and hopefully win it. So it means a lot, and it means that I proved to myself that I put in the time and I put in the effort. And it's just a relief, if I'm honest. There was a lot of pressure, particularly with the new place opening up next door. I really didn't want to come away with anything but first. So.
And how did you celebrate receiving such a prestigious award?
That was an interesting question, actually. I think because the semi-final and the final was split between 2 days, almost 5 days apart, the whole week was spent a little bit nerve-wracking. You just spent all your time in Havana, sort of rereading notes, and then once I'd actually passed the final, it was early in the morning, so I spent the rest of the day kind of watching the rest of the contest. And then that evening we all went out and, have you been to Havana? There's, at the Hotel Nacional is a sort of like meeting point for everybody in the industry during the festival. And so everybody was there. It's like it's a bit of a ritual thing. At the end of the festival, everyone meets there for a sort of after party. And so genuinely I just sat back with my team, just recounted the week, called home and just could finally relax. And then the next day just spent it on a beach. I just thought, if I'm going to actually get a holiday out of this for at least one day, it'll be the day after the contest. So
treat yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So spent a day on the beach is the answer to that.
Sounds good. Obviously it's very competitive with so many people coming from across the world to compete. Did you have any professional training with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Hunters provide quite a good bit of training. So Jimmy McGee is the head of their communications, and he was very thorough in sort of giving all of the syllabus, essentially, or the work that you needed to revise inside out for the Masters contest. And then once that was out of the way and I started to ask around what what the contest was like. People like the runner-up from last year, who's a good friend of mine called Slavomir, who's currently managing the new JJ Fox at Harrods. He was in the contest, and so he was like, right, this is what you need to prepare for. This is what they're going to ask you. They're going to throw you sort of curveballs here and there. So between our suppliers, friends who have done the contest, amazing people like the Sahakians at the Davidoff store in St James's, Gemma Freeman, the MD of Hunters and Frankow, there was a huge amount of support and content to learn from. There's one more person I would like to thank, but he prefers to remain nameless. So yeah, he's very much an expert and a mentor, but he prefers not to have sort of any time in the limelight. Yeah, he's an amazing man, but he put me down this path really originally.
Lovely. So you just said that you got a few tips from your competitor last year, the runner-up. And did you want to give any tips to the people that will be applying next year? Just one?
I've been asked this question a few times, and I think the answer I keep coming back to is to prepare for the unexpected. And that's because, you know, they really do throw some curveballs at you during the contest, whether it's you know, last minute questions about brands or about lines that you weren't really going to or weren't asked to revise for initially. So I think the best bit of advice is just be really thorough. Like, you know, just learn every little nitty gritty of all these brands and these shapes that you may not necessarily see in your country. So, you know, on the stage in the cabinet there were a couple of cigars that we don't see in the UK. They just do not get distributed here. So, you know, if I'd gone into the contest just knowing what we have in our catalogue, they would have caught me out. Now, actually, they did catch me out, you know, and I was quite honest about it. I said, you know, this is a cigar that we do not see in the United Kingdom, but it is XYZ. So, yeah, I think being as thorough as possible about what is being released, not regional editions, but the special sort of Casa de Habanos lines that's being released around the world that may not necessarily have made it to your market yet, is really important, because they like that. If you've done your homework properly, they can tell.
What did you enjoy most about the festival, excluding your win, of course?
I think being in Havana for a week is a nice time to spend your February. Yeah, I think genuinely that, you know, I've had some of the best food in my life in Havana as well, which will come as a surprise to a lot of people. You know, but if you know where to go, there's some really amazing hospitality in Havana. You know, little coffee shops which, you know, people have kind of been trained in New York or in London. You know, I was walking around Havana one day and sort of peered into a window and saw a really beautiful coffee machine. And then walked in and had a coffee, and it was great. And I spoke to the guy and I said, you know, where have you got all of this from? You know, where's your interest in coffee come from? And then behind him I saw like Ottolenghi cookbooks and River Cafe cookbooks, and I thought, this is bizarre. Like, and it turns out he used to work for this company. Years ago he used to work for us, and not at Mart's Club, but in Caprice Holdings. And, you know, Cuban guy, and so he said, I just came back home and set up my own coffee shop. So there are these amazing stories like that all over town. And then, you know, on top of that, you know, I'm a keen photographer, and I just think every street corner in Havana is like a set. You know, it's you know, food for the eyes everywhere. So I think just wandering around the town was one of my favourite things to do. Often I'd do it in the morning on my own. I'd just, you know, everyone would still be asleep, and I'd just go downtown and go walk around. So yeah, I think just being in Havana really was a treat in itself.
And what's your favourite aspect of the cigar world entirely?
I think the people. I think the people that I've met in the cigar business have been the most generous with their time, the most friendly, and genuine. Like, I honestly mean that. You know, the people in the cigar business that see the passion in each other are constantly sharing things with one another. Try this, or I found this, or, you know, God, I had a box of these 20 years ago and I decided to crack one open. I mean, it's a really lovely sort of group of people. So I think definitely the people have been the most welcoming in this business compared to other industries in London that I've worked for.
And do you have a favourite cigar or brand?
I think the UK regional Polar Añaga Sobresalientes is one of my favourite cigars of all time. I think it's just brilliant. Really tasty, quite a nice size, not too strong, so you can have it at any time of day. And on top of that, I think Polar Añaga is one of my favourite brands. It's obviously the oldest brand that's available on the market, but it's just, the Petit Corona is a great cigar with a coffee, and then the Sobresalientes is something you can have after lunch. And there are a few brands that I kind of always go back to, but Polar Añaga is definitely one of them. On the other end of the spectrum, I think Habanos is probably the one I prefer out of the strong flavoured or profiled cigars, for sure.
Nice choices. And is there anything about the industry that you don't like, and would you change anything about it?
That's a good question. I don't think I can answer that question. I don't think I could criticise or rather suggest change to an industry that I am not fully aware of yet. Passing this contest and being a master of Havana cigars is great, but there are people in this business that been doing it for 50 years that are, I think, much more. What's the word? They've got the knowledge and the experience to actually make those suggestions much more than I do. So I don't think I'd feel comfortable trying to make any suggestions for that, because I'm still learning a huge amount about it.
Okay. Obviously in your line of work you're surrounded by so many inspiring people. We were wondering, who in the cigar world do you look up to the most and why?
Apart from he who will not be mentioned, I think Edward Sahakian and Gemma Freeman are probably the two that I look up to the most in the business. Edward is just a legend in his own right. Both of them won, Habanos Man of the Year or Habanos Woman of the Year. They're both loved by the whole industry, and they're masters of what they do. I think those two are probably the most. Nick Phelps is quite an interesting character too. He writes, he's a writer of course, but he's recently published his book on cigars, but as a character in many different industries, but also quite prominent in the cigar industry. I think he's someone that I look up to too. He's quite a character.
I'll have to get his book.
I'll give you a copy.
Sounds great. Okay, and what do your friends and family think of your job and your win?
That's an interesting question, because my job is actually as general manager of the club. It's not just on cigars, so I think the industry of hospitality as a whole in the UK has been quite it's received in different ways, and I think some people see it as a sort of career and something that they'll do for the rest of their life because they're so passionate about it. I think others find it as a sort of stepping stone between jobs or after university or something like that. So to answer your question, I think my family initially, when I got into hospitality, were a bit confused as to what I would be doing in hospitality. They didn't know that you could be a maitre d' or what a maitre d' really was. And then add on top of that the confusion of I'm also a Habanos World sommelier champion. Not many people know that even exists. You tell them about wine somms and master of wine contests, fine. People can understand that, but everybody I've spoken to and who has learnt that there is this contest, I said, what do? You just sit there and smoke cigars? And of course it's nice to be able to tell them no, there's a lot more that goes into it than that. But essentially a lot of cigar smoking is involved. So I think the reaction has been partly confusion, but in more of a sort of a wonderment sense. They wanted to know because it's nothing they'd ever heard of before. So I think it was more of an interest rather than a misunderstanding.
Sure.
But
I first found out about it.
And what did you think?
I was like, wow, I didn't know.
Yeah, and most people. And the good thing about that is, if I hadn't won, then no one would have known. So.
And what is your greatest fear?
I genuinely think it's myself. I think I can get myself into a lot of trouble. So I'm constantly learning, constantly trying to be a better person. I think there's few things to be fearful of that are in your control. So I think it's probably myself. I think I'm my greatest fear if I want to be. So as long as I keep myself in check, I think I'm okay.
I like that answer. And what's your greatest extravagance?
My greatest extravagance? Cigars are quite extravagant. I don't know. I think I really, really love sort of men's tailoring. I think my greatest extravagance, though, would probably be travel. But at least with travel, you're at least kind of getting some sort of nourishment out of that as well by learning more about other places and becoming a little bit more cultured and worldly. And so, although it's an extravagance, traveling a lot and going to stay in new cities, you're getting a lot more out of it than just buying something and going, right, this is great, I love this, I've now got it. I think traveling is probably my greatest extravagance, but it's so rewarding that I think it justifies it.
You're against Cuban competitor Mabel Duran.
Mm-hmm.
We recently read that one of the main challenges she faced was not having access to some wines to prepare for the pairings. Did you face any challenges like that?
Did I face any challenges like that? I mean, I feel for Mabel because, of course, that was obvious. The selection of what's available in Havana is very narrow in comparison to what you get in most cities in Europe. So I was very lucky. I mean, I had anything I could think of, at my fingertips. With all the restaurants in our group, with all the clubs in our group, the fact that we were just opening Annabelle's, I could literally pick any alcohol out and it would be there. I can't say I felt that I was at any disadvantage in that sense. I feel like I had the full advantage in that sense because, my pairing was based around afternoon tea, is what I called it, the Havanan afternoon tea. And so I started with a tea and found, the best London tea purveyor called Lalani & Co. The tea was from 6,000 feet above sea level in the Himalayan mountains. The Cigars, Choix Supreme, wonderful cigar from El Rey del Mundo, but then the Grand Marnier was their edition that they released in 1927 to commemorate 100 years since the first distillery opened. So I can't complain. I mean, I had amazing products at my fingertips and amazing people to train me through them. I don't drink, so for part of the contest where you have to blind taste 5 spirits, I mean, that was tricky. I have drunk before and I know what certain base alcohols taste like easily, but being able to distinguish the difference between certain rums and cognacs was tricky, certain whiskies and cognacs was tricky. So for me, I had every advantage in that sense because I had our bar manager, our bar director, the tea purveyors, giving me this training and saying, right, pick up the notes of that and this, and what can you get on the glass and that. And I can't fall back on anything. I had everything available to me, but I was quite worried about Mabel's pairing because when I saw it, it was the new 2018 Havana Club Tributo, which I hadn't even seen yet, and the new Partagas limited edition Series Number 1, which hadn't been released yet. So I'm there thinking, okay, I feel like I've got everything prepared and airtight and the story's perfect, and then I see that pairing, I'm like, oh no, like those are the 2 products that are going to be on the market very soon. I have no idea what those 2 products would be like together, so that gave me a little bit of fear. But yeah, to answer your question, I think I had all the advantage in that sense.
I've also found that it's less common to see women partaking in cigar smoking in competitions like the Havana Festival and the competition that you're involved in. Why do you think that is?
I think if I'm a good representative of the sort of male market of cigar smokers, I think maybe because, we like to obsess over subjects more, perhaps. At least I do. Instead of knowing a little bit about a lot of things, once I find I'm passionate about something, I sort of obsess about knowing absolutely everything about it. Of course, I don't know a huge number of female smokers. I do know some amazing women who are cigar smokers, but it's a fraction of the number of men that I know that smoke, of course. But in terms of, why do we see less cigar smokers who are female in these contests? Again, I think a part of it is perhaps not knowing about the contest in itself, maybe. But also I think there are other products which you can really delve into, which you can find all over the globe, like wine, which attract more evenly balanced men and women as sommeliers. Whereas, I think majority of the reason why it's men is because we like to obsess over things like watches and cars, cigars and suits, and so maybe something to do with that. But yeah, there's no doubt that that it's outbalanced big time.
In line with that, do you believe there is gender equality in your line of work? And if not, what do you think needs to be done to change that?
I do. In this group particularly, I do. I mean, again, I'm talking about the hospitality industry as a whole. If you look at our group, or in fact, if you even look at Mark's, our AGM is female. In fact, the top 3 of our 5 most senior managers are women. The executive director of the group is a woman. The membership director is a woman. The head of communications is a woman. I'd say it's very equal. But again, I live in London. I'd like to think that we are leading the way in that. I wouldn't be able to comment on cigar industry as a whole. I have one really, really great team member working for us at Annabelle's called Vanessa, who is really passionate about cigars. And then, of course, we've spoken about Sophia earlier. So there are these characters that are really into the cigars just as much, or if not more, than the men are. But they're few and far between, for sure. But in terms of equality, I don't see any inequality in my line of business.
And so you've got your hands in all different sort of businesses, as in like the Marks Club, Annabelle's. Mm-hmm. What's your next step in your career?
In my career, that's a tricky one. I think the dream one day is to have my own place, for sure. And there's no secret about that. I mean, I think anybody in this business who says otherwise might be fibbing. I think it's a lovely idea to have your own place with all your own touches to it and your own team, and of course. But for now, my focus is getting the cigar shop at Annabelle's really kind of buzzing. We've been open for 5 weeks, so there's still a huge amount of work to do. For now, it's definitely that. The cigar shop is priority number 1, and then one day in the future, I'd like to have my own place, but probably a restaurant.
Do you know what you'll call it?
I don't know what I'd call it. No, I do not know what I'd call it yet. In the past, I've come up with some incredibly cheesy names, but I'm backtracking from that as I get older. So.
And last but not least, obviously it would be a shame not to ask you what you would pair for a warm summer's day, very much like today.
That's a lovely question. I think a Saimadori kabusecha, like a green tea from Japan, cold, sort of served on ice. That tea has like this unbelievable amount of like umami. So like for me, when I first drank it, I just needed another glass immediately. So I'm clearly quite susceptible to that, to that flavour. And what I usually do at home is, once I've done a couple of brews, I'll just put some cold water in it, stick it in the fridge, and then that evening it will be a really nice, refreshing green tea, but cold. So I think definitely that. I mean, today was scorching, and that's what I was thinking about a lot. And then what cigar would I pair that with? That's a good question. It'd be too easy to go back to an El Rey del Mundo. I think it would have to be something like, I tried the new regional edition for the UK that's going to be coming out in a couple of years. It's called the La Reina, and it is an El Rey del Mundo, but it's a Lancero size, and it was unbelievable. I mean, it was really quite something, and I haven't been able to get it out of my mind since. I tried it in Havana with Gemma. And we don't see a huge amount of Lancero-sized cigars anymore. I mean, barely any. So to have one that's new, coming out soon, in a different brand than, Cohiba, or, of course, you had Bolivar did a regional edition, I think, and Trinidad Fundadora is, of course, a little bit bigger, but anything in that sort of size, that got me really excited. I think a lot of people got quite excited by it because, it's so much of a trend to have short, kind of thick ring gauge cigar now. To have something that's polar opposite to that is quite bold. So I think I'd have to imagine that I have that cigar and a chilled cup of Cabucecha.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it's really delicious. I'm going to see if I can find out how I can get some from Gemma.
Well, I think that's everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Congratulations on the award again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Pleasure to meet you.